Cheers.
There's two Sams.
Salud. Who's the second Sam?
The Sam Tribuco.
Oh, both Sams. I got
Yeah.
Sam, Alabama.
Thanks for these cute little
Tobacco.
glasses, Steven.
Those are
Welcome,
not cheap.
ladies and gentlemen, D-Gens and D-Genettes, to another episode of the Alfalfa Podcast. We are four radically moderate entrepreneurs and investors swimming in the messy gray ocean, serving up alpha and money, politics, and life. We are Nick Urbani, Steven Cesaro, Eric Johansson, and I'm Armand Asadi. All links at alfalfapod.com. Always make sure you hit subscribe. If you don't, we know love you long time. But if you subscribe, we got some goodies for you in the Discord. We just finished an epic, amazing little Discord live stages thing. What do you call that?
That was fun. We met some of our members. That was very cool.
My heart is so full.
Yeah, so for those of you that weren't there, which is most of you, actually, inside of our Discord, we have an incredible group of people. So if you're not already there, you need to join our Discord. The link to that is at alfalfapod.com. We've got a bunch of different channels now. We actually expanded from being, what was the phrase for that? Minimalist maxis, to now having 3 channels of conversation. And we scheduled basically a pre-recording happy hour live chat. We just talked for an hour to everybody. It was absolutely amazing. Got to meet in real time all the people we've been talking to. So hop in. I think we're going to make this a regular thing, whether it's before the episodes or not. It'll be at different times. Definitely join the party. And the after party, of course, is in the Discord. You guys want to keep doing those, right?
That was hell of a fun. Got a lot of smart chaps and
Hell of a
chapettes. Yeah. Hell of a fun.
What's a hell of a fun?
What are you drinking, boys? What are we drinking today?
I am on everything. I think there's scotch in this, and then I'm going to this burgundy that Steven gave me. What is this?
No, it's a
tell
white
me about
wine.
this. I think it's
White
a
wine can come from Burgundy.
Okay.
You absolute
Yeah.
pleb.
Shun me. Shun me.
Yeah, what is this?
I'm drinking the same alongside my Pacifico with citrus and agave, which is just an abomination to all Mexican beer. It was the only thing I had in my fridge.
Yeah, that's that kind of like
It's
commercialized
quite
shit.
I like it. It's quite the, like heaven and hell, chaos and order kind of combination.
You just
of
finished a
booze here in front of me.
Celsius energy drink, you sick fuck.
I didn't finish it, but I also have a Celsius here. So I have the drink trifecta.
So pre-warning, we've been a little saucy from the pre-happy hour Discord, but I think we're going to do great. So today we are diving into, let me give you the agenda. Obviously, as always, we'll start with the Alfalfa round. We'll talk to you about our trades, our moves, our thoughts for the week, what we've done since the last episode. For the investing, it's kind of a what the hell is going on, what are we doing, what's on the shopping list roundup. We're really just going to have a conversation because it's been obviously one of the most chaotic weeks so far in this cycle. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Policy, we want to talk about inflation. Obviously, big event today. We're recording this on Wednesday, June 15th. And we're going to finish up with something very spicy, philosophical, the AI Google LaMDA Sentience event that happened over the weekend. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to explore, can AI be sentient and what happened, and dive deep into our personal thoughts, feelings, opinions about all of that, and get kind of heady, get kind of out there into the, go down the rabbit hole. Cool. Why don't you kick it off, sir?
Alfalfa round. Okay, few trades. We'll get into a little more specifics in the investing round, but I closed out some Solana shorts and just refreshing the numbers. Thank God.
Good move.
Yeah, survived that. Made a little scalp, and then I bought some STETH. So we'll talk about that a little more. But those are the moves for last
good.
week.
Easy.
Okay.
Easy peasy.
I scooped some ETH on this dip, which I probably will move to STETH at some point. My thought there is basically just that, like, I sold ETH much earlier. I sold it like 32, 3,400, which I'm happy about. But like, I want to own more ETH. So I'll buy some here, and I'll buy some maybe a little lower. And, I kept my shorts open. So fuck me.
You're still in the green though, right?
Yeah. And I feel pretty comfy there as well. So.
Okay.
That's lovely.
You're feeling good.
Don't.
You had a good time at this little.
I do feel
you
good.
had a
Thank
good
you.
time.
Yeah. I'm enjoying myself.
Tell us about your week, Steven.
Yeah, Sunday was a wild day for me. I mean, I started the day uber long. I was like, ooh, I'm going to go long Bitcoin here. Bottom of the range. Everybody's bearish. And then I very quickly realized I was wrong. And then I was like, I'm going to close. And then I was like, wait, why am I just closing? I'm wrong. I'm just going to go short. So I went uber short. Completely flip-flopped in a span of like 7 minutes and had my best trading day of all time.
Whoa.
Rode that wave all the way down. Closed out around like 22.5, I think. And then I was like, that's enough. And I watched it go to 20 and I was like, I'm dumb. But then, yeah, we're kind of back here. So I feel pretty good. I'm mostly flat. I shorted the Justin Sun Tron coin, which is not working out right now, to be transparent with you.
Looked
all.
easy money to start.
I honestly, I'm only down a little bit on the trade, but it's kind of a dangerous short at this point. So I wouldn't recommend anybody do it. But I just want it to die so badly. Apologies to anybody who's in it, but you shouldn't be in it. you should have learned your lesson at this point. So I don't feel too bad for you. But yeah, that was my week.
Okay.
I think a lot of people share that sentiment.
That's good.
In our community.
Good.
My week was one of actually a lot of journaling and writing.
Reassessing.
Romance poetry.
I feel like everyone just took that very differently. So maybe we'll leave it up to interpretation. I kind of like that.
You're just making me feel like such a troglodyte now.
You didn't DCA? I'm sure you did.
No, they're definitely what I meant by that was specifically about everything that has happened. I feel like I needed to revisit a lot of my strategies and plans around investing in crypto. I needed to, part of the process of journaling was a process of actually rewriting out my beliefs, my thesis, my feelings, my opinion on what has happened, and actually working through the emotions of the week and what was happening, watching my portfolio go down by another, I don't even know, 50%. And
Wait, you still own coins?
yeah,
Stop.
I do. Unlike you guys, I did not. I mean, no.
I have a lot of exposure to ETH still through
Yeah.
my dumb liquid JPEG purchases. But
Yeah. So the JPEGs I had already cycled out of, for the most part, everything except I actually sold my other deed a few days ago.
Nice.
For
You still have
Breathe.
another deed. Wow.
yeah, I sold one.
Damn.
And for actually the same like price that it would have been at the peak, like on that day. So not too bad. But really, it was about revisiting a lot of things, and I think that there's a lot of insights that'll come to light next week for me that I want to share and kind of more in that session talk about. But it had a lot to do with just understanding how I got where I am, what is it that I'm going to be doing or not doing for the time being, and in terms of like real actionable stuff, have been DCing into both Bitcoin and Ethereum, but very small nibbles because I think that this week for me was about watching how everyone was reacting. And I think there was like a good level of panic, but more questions than action on the most part for most people. So what that told me was that I don't think we've seen the maximum level of panic selling that we'll probably see next week. It was funny, and we'll get into this, but today was like a little bit of like a bullshit, rally that I think we just want to get over with so that we can go into the full depth of the bleeding that we really want to see so that we understand what this bottom actually looks like and where we're going to kind of start to flatline. So for me, I think most of my moves will be next week.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I think that leads really well into this first segment, because I think the initial idea for this segment was, we've talked about in previous podcasts about having a thesis of how you're going to invest, and not only that, but writing it down. And I think we even mentioned this on some of our investing mistakes episode, where we even had a written plan, but didn't necessarily, the execution didn't follow. So, I started off this topic by saying, like, I'm trying to write down my bear market thesis and what my plan is, my shopping list, how I kind of foresee it going. And obviously thesis change, but I think it's important to like kick off how we view this. And I think most people, specifically in the Discord and most people listening, are kind of pondering this question of like, what's the plan of attack?
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but mostly I really don't look at the USD value a lot of the crypto portfolio. Like my goal, and I think your guys' goal is like, I want to acquire more coins. I want more Bitcoin. I want more Ethereum. I want more of the coins that I feel long term about. And Steven's giving me like funny smirks. But in general, that's what it is.
Best not to look at Steven when you're going through your
Yeah.
notes and ideas.
This is literally my journal.
Very, very off-putting.
I'm going through my diary.
I resonated with none of what you're saying.
Give me your eyes.
Thank
I got
you. Thank you.
I'll
Oh, God.
reassure these.
All right,
points.
my diary is safe
Dude,
with you.
I had the exact same moment in like 2 episodes ago where I was really excited about this whole thing, and Steven was just like, "This is
My 2017 self really resonated with what you were saying.
Yeah, maybe I'm a cycle behind.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Please continue, sir.
So I don't know. I think I think we're at the lows, if not very, very close to lows. Like
Yeah.
I think macro economy lows, we're definitely not there yet. And there's a question in my mind if we front run that in the crypto market, front run the economy lows. I think the stock market, typically front runs the economy lows like 6 to 9 months or so. So, does macro bring bad news and bring lower lows? I don't know if that's true. Barring a dive into a depression, I don't think so. So I think we're at good lows. We've talked about in the past. I think I mentioned the Bankless podcast when we recorded a few weeks ago. I was looking for 200-week moving averages. It feels like a safe place. You may not, tick the bottom, but it feels like a safe place to play. And so starting to buy here. In terms of how things will go going forward, I don't think we're going to rip all-time highs for a while. Like maybe 2 to 3 years out. We could potentially wick down to like a 300-week moving average, which for Bitcoin would be, I think 16, 17K. For ETH, that would be like around 750K. But it's also highly possible we don't go there. So, and I think a lot of the liquidation risk is flushed out. I think some of you guys maybe disagree, but I think most of it is flushed out. So starting to buy, going to continue to do so over the next 6 months. I think over the next 6 months, lots of chop going to happen. Buying STETH right now, taking the discount that it's at, about 6 or 7% seems
We
where
should definitely talk about
I
it.
think that narrowed. I think it narrowed down
5%.
Yeah.
4 or 5
4.
now.
It
4
was,
even.
it was down to 11 briefly.
Damn.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
That would have been nice.
We should go into that.
Yeah. And anyway, I'm gonna definitely buy ETH proper to save a validator or two worth to as over the next 6 months. And I think like it's important as we talk about hitting the bottom. It's important to bring in the fact that like we're not going to rip higher all of a sudden anytime soon. Just because you pick the bottom doesn't mean we could stay here for like 2 to 3 years. And I think for me, what I need to see happen to know that we're going to go into a bull market is to see what got us here reverse, which is we had the prospect of higher inflation, higher interest rates, and just in general, like the trust ripped out of the crypto market with Luna and Terra, Celsius, and everything else that's come along. And that will take time. Like in general, I think that the stock market and I think the crypto market needs to see, inflation start to peak, interest rates start to peak. We need to see the Fed kind of turn around and loosen again, which might take a few years. And then specifically for the crypto market, trust to be restored. I think we had that violated, and that's going to take some time. So in all those, I think it's going to take a few years before we have the beginnings of a bull market again.
I was hoping you wouldn't say that.
I think in 2 years, like around this time, in 2024, you could still be hovering around like 40, 50K Bitcoin. And it doesn't sound fun, but I think it's somewhat realistic. And, I think if we're lucky, a late 2024 beginnings of a bull run, it gives the Fed enough to tighten, to bring down inflation and also maybe turn around interest rates depending on how bad the economy turns. Only buying ETH, I think right now, like my Bitcoin allocation is pretty much set. Do have a shopping list of all kinds of fun stuff, like some alt L1s for some higher beta. Definitely maybe some DeFi tokens that might come back around that time over the next year. And whatever is new and fancy at the time. NFTs, looking at punks and fidenzas on my personal shopping list. But I don't think I'm going to be touching any of those. Definitely for not 6 months. It could be a while out before touching those. Just kind of holding down for BTC and ETH for now. So anyway, that's the current thesis. Obviously things can change, but that's how I'm kind of looking forward to it.
There's so many ways to take this conversation. Are we just going to round table what our strategy is and like individually go into it, or?
I think we should use this time how we would use this time anyway, which is like, what the fuck are you doing? How are you playing this? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Which is exactly what everyone else is thinking and feeling.
So I'll start like this. When ETH was at 3,400 or whatever, when I exited, we were in this same spot talking with Hoffman, and I was saying like, no, I just think this is gonna get so ugly. I exit, but then at that same moment, I was also playing through like the Nick Urbani scenario. Like, okay, so let me write down when I want to get back in, what my strategy is going to be. I said at 1,700, I was going to get back in and like get back in heavy. It went through 1,700 and now it's at 1,200. I started buying, but I still haven't I haven't bought back in really heavy, but I am thinking back to that time thinking like, well, shit, I said I would. It doesn't look great, right? Like we would all sit around this table say like macro doesn't look too compelling. So like buying at 1,200 ETH doesn't sound like I should shove in right now, but you know what? Like long term, I'm almost positive that this is going to be just a good time to buy. So
it feels like a safe place, not the like most optimal, but like a safe place.
And like we're not going to bottom tick everything we're going to try to buy, and that's silly to even try, anyways.
But I think if you saw like sub 1,000, you'd really start shoving.
So to 2 points. One is Nick's point that he said like the markets do front run the economy, right? Like we saw all markets come down before we hit a recession. Like we're probably going to hit a recession. But Steven dropped some good stuff in the Discord today. He said like all of stock pullbacks have been on multiple compression. And that's true, right? We still have like consensus expectations of earnings being even higher this year and next. And that won't happen, right? Like we're pretty certain that won't happen. So like stocks will fall farther as earnings come in lower than expectations. So maybe there's still more room on the downside, but long term, like, we will front run the economy in the markets as well on the upside, so maybe when we hit a recession, maybe markets still like come back higher.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go now?
You can go whenever you like, bro. This is, of course.
Are you warning of us a tidal wave right now? Like I feel like that's you're about to.
I don't know. I feel like I always bring the bearish tsunami.
Well, you're a little different because like your portfolio is mostly crypto, right? I think that's like important for people to understand. Like your total investable assets are mostly crypto.
Yeah, my portfolio is crypto, real estate, and cash.
Right.
It's almost entirely cash right now. I mean, I have like some like real estate, you just like liquidate it. You buy it and you kind of ride it out. Right now, I really want to sell my house, but also,
what are you going to buy at 6.5% mortgage interest rates?
I would just rent and weather the storm. But I did really want to take my 1 year 130% like profits on my house really badly, but I got mentally committed to it because
such a degen trader. If you start,
I got a HELOC I can sell you. Yeah.
Your primary residence.
Yeah. I bought all this furniture. I put so much time into like making it.
You got a piano in here. There's a grand piano.
I need a place to put it.
You literally just moved in.
I did, but like I also just knew it was going to tank, and I still do think it's probably going to tank. I mean, that's just the reality of having like plus 6% like mortgage rates. It's kind of nutty. But yeah, the rest of my portfolio, like I kind of go back and forth between the cash and crypto trade. I like to do the barbell thing. I like to be like all in or all out. And I don't really believe in this sort of middle of the road diversification thing, which is, I think better if you're like an active trader. And if you're not, it's not a good strategy. You probably want to diversify. But if you like Stan Druckenmiller said on that last interview we listened to, he likes to just put on like a position and just watch that thing, and he'd be so all in on it that he has to watch it at all times.
I felt that because like I have he called them like zombie investments, like basically where it's like less than 10% of your portfolio, 15% of your portfolio, you don't give it the attention it needs. But if it's 60%, 50%, you're sure gonna watch that like a hawk and become an expert.
Yeah, and like look, if you for some reason you're one of the 3 people who follow me on Twitter for the last year, you're probably like, why did this guy just go from like tweeting about spooky swap to be being like a macro LARP all of a sudden? Like I don't talk about any weird altcoins or anything crypto, because to me it's like irrelevant. To me the only trade that matters is like when is macro going to bottom, and all the other stuff to me I don't care about. I want to know when to get into crypto. I want to know when to buy back in and kind of ride that wave back up. And I think that's dependent on macro. So all I do now is watch macro, So I think what the Fed is doing right now is dumb. But what they are doing is trying to sort of suck liquidity out of the risk element of the market, right? I think they're sort of actually like pretending that they're tackling inflation, because I choose to believe that they're not dumb enough to think that they're actually fighting inflation in an intelligent way. I think what they're trying to do is deflate the stupid asset bubble so that later the government can like reinflate stuff, but inflate intelligent areas of the economy, like shovel money into productive areas. That's sort of my theory, right? So to me, like the most dumb risk on area of everything has been like the long tail crypto trade, like outside of Bitcoin and ETH and all the dumb crap we bought, right? So I like to look at the sort of broader crypto market. Like, have you ever looked at like the total market cap, like 2, total market cap 3? Total market cap 2 is like all crypto except Bitcoin, and then total market cap 3 is all crypto except Bitcoin and ETH. So total market cap 3 to me is like a really interesting like chart to watch, because to me it represents all of the dumb crap about crypto, basically. Sure, there's some good stuff in there, but it's mostly to me a representation of the risk on trade, right? And when I look at that chart, if I am like the Fed, like I don't think the Fed's really looking at this chart, but like it's the essence of what they're trying to do. And if I look at this chart in a sort of dispassionate way, in a best case scenario, I see like negative 30%. And then in like a bad scenario, I still see like another negative 60%. And so I don't really want to buy ETH yet. I don't really want to buy Bitcoin yet. I would if I was like a longer term person, but like I like to be like very in or very out. And to me, like I just still think there's too much risk there. It's hard for me to see us just magically picking a bottom here. Like we could, if Jerome just decides that I'm good, I'm just gonna for some reason stop. But like I still see a lot more pain. I'm not focused on buying any alts. I'm not focused on buying any long tail alts. I'm still just like, where is the crypto bottom? And I do see still a lot of systemic risk with like the Celsius and the 3 Arrows Capital and all these other like kind of like large institutions within crypto that are insolvent, right? And maybe liquidating.
Were you guys surprised by the 3 Arrows Capital? Like,
Obviously.
I was surprised, actually.
Super surprised, right?
I thought they were just counter trading us the whole time, and it seems like they were actually shilling their positions, but their positions were just bad.
And leveraged.
They went down. They went down with the ship. They were just long crypto.
I mean, what a crazy story! It's two guys who like started trading, in their kitchen or whatever, and like built themselves up to billions, and now it's possibly true that like there's not much left, which is insane to me.
Insane.
Like, I mean, maybe we'd all agree that like if we got to $1 billion, we wouldn't even use leverage. But who knows? When you're in it, maybe you kind of just.
So what about the contagion, right? Like Celsius goes down, 3 Arrows goes down. What does that create a cascading effect that hits retail on a wider basis?
I mean, so to use like something I'm personally doing, like I'm trying to pull out of Nexo, like as we speak.
What do you mean trying? Is it not? What do you mean?
Because I'm dealing with TradFi, and it takes days to send money.
Nexo offered to buy out Celsius. Did you see that?
No.
They're like,
Yeah,
we'll buy your bad
we'll
debt.
buy you.
Really?
I mean, I would still not have my money in there.
I just
It's
want
very,
to
like-
get out. There's no.
You
there's
shouldn't want to
nothing.
get out. You
There's
should
no
want to
interest,
be.
There's no yield.
You should want to be in nothing.
There's nothing in there for me anymore. I had taken like some loan out on their system, and to pay it off, it's taking like 4 days.
Oh, to pay off is what's taking.
I'm not at like liquidation risk, but I want to pay it off and get the fuck out.
Yeah.
And it's taking so long, and I'm going through all the drama of like the old way of like a wire transfer and all this stuff, and it's just days. So for me, for example, to answer the question of contagion, I think that for a person who is ready to roll with like, self-custody, and isn't like terrified at the prospect of setting up a hardware wallet, they absolutely should. Like, this is the time. Steven's been saying it. We've all been saying it in the Discord. Like, you don't really want to stick around to see what could happen. I mean, I was really curious what you said, Steven, to the point where like this was an interesting thing that came up in the, it was like developers may get desperate. Send your crypto to an absolutely fresh wallet on your hardware wallet, complete cold storage, like totally new wallet that has never transacted before. Like, I guess I would not have gone to that level of thinking to think like,
Maybe.
oh wow, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Like, is everything up for target at this point? Like, have you ever seen that happen?
It just takes
to that
one
level?
bad like approval to drain your entire wallet.
It
And
does,
It's
but-
so much easier to just condense all your funds to like stable coins and ETH and then just send them to a new wallet, as opposed to like revoking the 700 different like permissions you granted in the last like 2 years of the bull market.
Right.
So even something like
is
BlockFi that is outside of this whole news cycle.
I think BlockFi is
No, they're
at risk.
they're-
I wouldn't
they're
put
included, I
money in
think.
BlockFi.
Right. Okay. So I guess my point was like, there's people in there who have these like grandfathered accounts. These grandfathered accounts allow them to capture like 6 or 7% yield on
Yeah.
USDC. And I have friends hit me up saying like, well, I should keep this like USDC yield. And I'm
Oh,
thinking like,
fuck that.
your whole principle's at risk.
Yeah,
It's
like
not worth it.
I think I was on vacation when you guys did a podcast on the like Luna Terra collapse, and while it was happening on vacation, I was like, I need to whip out my laptop, and the first thing I did was pull it out of BlockFi, Nexo, double check. Did I have anything in these? And I just sent it out, closed the laptop, and I was back. But I don't think your 1%, return that you're going to get from it is not worth it at all. So I think
It's not
that's
worth
pretty.
Like when there's no transparency, right? Like there was literally a Y Combinator company that did this, right? They took USDC from you and they paid you like 7%. But what they were doing was like taking your USDC, selling it for UST, like the Luna stable, collecting 19%,
Anchor.
pocketing 12% and paying you 7%. And then when that collapsed, you just lost all your money. And there was no, I would rather have my money in the USDD like Tron stablecoin than have it in BlockFi, right?
But don't do that.
A, I'm gonna get like 40%.
Yeah, just to be clear.
But like B, like at least I can check the chain, right? And be
Right.
like, oh, there's this much collateralization in the wallet, and the second that goes down, I have some control. I'm not saying to do that. I mean, I honestly might not be a bad trade for like a tiny amount of money. It's probably fine, but like I think it's like a gambly play still, but I think it's a better play than having 6% in some black box where you don't know what they're doing with your money. Like the whole point of crypto is that you can check the chain. You can see exactly
What is
what
the yield on
everybody's doing.
USDD right now? Do you know?
40%.
That's
I know.
compelling.
Pretty compelling.
No way.
Pretty compelling.
Should we wrap this segment with shopping?
I mean, a little
there
bit. I mean,
anything to say about that?
I do want to ask you guys, like, I mentioned that what I need to see in order for things to change is, inflation peak, Fed reverse, and then trust restored, which takes time, because I think initially I was like, man, I'm going to pick the bottom. This would be great, but I think it's also good to set in the realization that like we could see chop and just up and down and just not much growth for years. And so what do you guys need to see in order to be like, okay, bull market potentially building and we're back on?
I mean, I need to see, I want to see a lot of things, right? A lot of people are going to be triggered by this, but like, I want to see like everybody with like an ape picture on Twitter to stop acting like there's some sort of financial genius. Like I want to see like, not because I want people to hurt, but like I do want to see like pain in the areas of crypto that were like the most bubbly, the most, not because I want people to suffer, but because that's going to be a sign to me that the system has been like purged. Like there's no going back up in my mind until we purge like the biggest excesses of the system. And one of the great things about crypto is that we actually do purge.
Pretty efficiently.
Even though it's like gross
agree
when
and
it
I love
happens,
that.
but like once it's done, it's done. Like it's done. Like the things that were bad die; they're dead forever. Like in the TradFi world, a huge percentage of the stock market is just like zombie companies to just like continue existing because they're just like riding on the coattails of this like stupid monetary policy, and they're not like adding value to the economy. And it's just like this giant fraud, and like you perpetually kick a can down the road until it finally like really explodes, right?
Right.
So at least in crypto, we get to just burn the forest down and then just start anew and have like the new growth, right? So I want to see like a lot of that stuff kind of just really cleanse. I want to see like the Celsiuses and the Three Arrows Capitals just go under. Like I don't want these systemic risks to exist in the system anymore. I want all of the crappy Ponzi protocols to die, and I want just all like the makers of the world to just still be standing there. Like
to me that describes a bottom. It doesn't necessarily describe the precursors for a bull run.
You're asking,
right? Like,
how do I know the bull run is
because
beginning?
the reason I'm asking is because one option is that you could just not play for a while until like
Right.
you see the.
Yeah, I love where you're going there.
Just-
I mean,
it's an
I-
option.
what I'm thinking.
It's an option.
I personally think that crypto front runs the TradFi world because it's sort of free of the sort of encumbrances that like prop up bad assets and prices that we have, right? So I do think crypto will bottom before TradFi bottoms, right? And I do think that means that like we're probably not going to get a V recovery because I think there's going to be a delay there. But I do think crypto will reverse very quickly. Like my default assumption is that we bottom and then we just sort of get boring for a bit and go flat. Because there's just nothing left to liquidate at a certain point.
Right.
And it's just only the hodlers and the OGs and the protocols that actually built to survive. And there's just nothing left at some point. But I do think like as soon as like the Fed reverses, it's just sort of back on again. That's
Yep.
like the ugly reality of the world is that there's just a guy with a button or like a light switch and he just flips it on or off and things go up or down.
What do you think, Eric? Like, what are your precursors for a bull market run again, or do you even care? Like, is it just I'm going to stack while I have the chance? I'm just going to hold it. Like, don't really care about
I'm in
when the
two
bull market
minds.
happens.
I don't consider myself a trader, so I have a bit of the Armand mentality where it's
I'm
like,
surprised by that statement.
well, I'm
'Cause you've started to appear like one.
no, well, that was just risk management, I think.
Yes.
But I am more just thinking like also this side of the table is like trying to stack the coins, and I do want to stack Bitcoin and ETH, and like now is a much better time to stack than it was 6 months ago. That's obvious.
Yeah.
I do think that even if you buy now, market buy ETH now, I think that's going to be in the money in 24 months. Like,
Yeah.
I think you're going to be fine. 36 months, whatever. Like, you can just name a time on it, and it's going to be in the money at some point fairly soon. So I think that's where I really believe I land. I think like you did a good job of identifying it's not just like price targets that's going to like incent you to buy. It's like what are the fundamentals in the economy? And I think like obviously a Fed pivot, but like what about just more apathy? What about just more apathy like on crypto Twitter where people just like
Sentiment.
disengage
Yeah.
entirely?
Everyone
where-
goes
When
quiet.
the discords go quiet,
yeah, just like
except the Alfalfa
everyone
one.
just thinks it's kind of over and just boring and dead, and then like maybe that's the time.
I mean, that is what happens. That's exactly what happens. Yeah.
Well, should we transition
Yes.
to our next topic?
Yes.
Like,
I'm
I think
excited for this.
because we've been talking a lot of macro a lot, and I think and we didn't used to talk a lot of macro a lot between the four of us even, but I think we've all realized that like it's a macro game, and for people in the Discord, people listening, you might have heard a lot of macro talk recently, but I think we all recognize we personally want to get a little more knowledgeable. We want to have these discussions more. So anyway, that's kind of like a starter for the next discussion, and what we're trying to dial into is questioning these inflation narratives that we've been seeing, and we've been seeing them in the headlines a lot on Twitter, and so we just want to question some of them. And I'll start off with like a tweet I made about roughly a week ago. What I started to get trouble with was around inflation, that the Fed is the only thing we talk about in terms of inflation. It is the only, driver and compressor of inflation. And I just started to think, I was like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. And I also started thinking about the politics coming up. We have midterms coming up. The Democratic Party is going to be tested on inflation, and they know that. So it's a stated goal to get inflation down. And then I just saw this disparity. I was like, well, there seems to be a disparity between what they want as the outcome and what they're doing, because there are things they can do. So in this tweet, I mentioned a few things. Number one, get involved in the West Coast port labor negotiations so we don't create more supply side problems for ourselves. I think the founder of Flexport has talked about this a lot, but up and down the West Coast, the people who man the ports are part of a union, and we can talk about public union monopolies at some point. Probably be a fun topic, but they do have this labor negotiation coming up, and President Biden is a labor person. His vote has come from labor. His money has come from labor. And I think this is the time where he steps in and says, okay, you've been on my side this whole time, but I am now the president of the United States. I have a bigger responsibility. And I'm telling you, do not get stuck in a negotiation. I want you to solve this quickly so that we don't step on our own feet. So anyway, that's one. The second is repeal the import tariffs. And I'm not just talking about a few, import tariffs that sound nice, like solar panels. That sounds great, kind of follows along the left agenda. I'm talking about all of the tariffs, not just the Chinese import tariffs. I'm talking even the Canadian tariffs. We have tariffs on, I think it's a lumber or timber, but one of those. And it just seems so silly now because tariffs are a tax on the American business, on the American consumer. No one in China, no one in Canada is actually paying this tax that we're placing on it. So if we want costs to go down, it's a simple one. I import goods from other countries. I understand this very well, and it will pass through pretty quickly. If it doesn't, cause decreases in price, it will certainly stop the increases in price. There are some weird rules that they've placed on government contracts, like Buy American rules, which sounds good. It sounds great, but really what we want is for government contracts for taxpayer money, we want companies to compete wherever they are, and we want the best deal possible for taxpayer money. So I think that's one. The other was end the emergency freeze on student loan payments. I mean, we're literally talking about the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates to make debt more expensive. Meanwhile, on the fiscal side, we're literally talking about forgiving debt. And, I think forgiving debt is a form of another high velocity stimulus. So I think that's one. And then we'll probably talk about this a little more, when you guys' thoughts, but support American oil and gas production. There are so many moratoriums and permit regulations. And I think another topic we could talk about in another episode is definitely energy policy and how this all ties in with inflation. But those are kind of my gripes that came up in the last week, just seeing there's something that can be done. And there is the argument that okay, but the Federal Reserve has the biggest, lever to pull, and the government doesn't. But I just
let me chime in, and I'll tee up Steven here because Steven, I know, is going to want to talk about how the Fed doesn't control inflation like we think it does. Yeah. So I think I'll ask the simple question: what percent of these other levers that Nick is talking about, like tariffs and labor unions and stuff, what percent do those levers actually control inflation if the Fed doesn't?
There was a study that was done on tariffs specifically. I think the quote was 100 basis points, 1.3% was the impact on inflation. It could lower inflation by 1.3% if you removed all the tariffs. And then you could dive into that study and say, okay, maybe that was politically motivated, funded by certain people. But in general, if you think of yourself as an individual actor, as an individual business, what does that do to your business and your economics? It seems to make a whole lot of sense. And I think just conceptually, if you're a political party in power, why would you want to continue to tax goods coming in?
That's kind of low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, so I think it's not nominal. It's not it's not small, but it's not the cure-all. But it's definitely enough to move the needle and also show the American people and your cabinet that this is the number one priority is to get inflation. He should be telling all of his cabinet secretaries do what you can within your responsibilities to get this down.
Okay, let me rephrase it then. Okay. I'll tee up Steven again. How did we get to 8.6% inflation right now? How did we even get there if it's not Fed monetary policy driven?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm gonna Tarantino this a little bit and start at the end and then go back to the beginning, I guess, because I think Nick brings up a good point, which is ultimately a lot of this stuff is decided by politicians. I think politicians are very short-sighted. They tend to do things that boost their electoral chances in the near term, and they kick the can down the road and punt stuff for the long term, right? So if you're a politician, right, and you want to get elected and inflation is a problem, and you have two options. One is to make long-term investments in increasing production on the supply side of goods so that price comes down, but it's like a 7-year duration. And the other option is to just destroy demand in the next 3 months. You probably opt for destroying demand because it's the quick, easy fix that brings the number on the chart down and gives you a thing to run on. But is that long-term productive? No. So like, how do we get here? I guess like I've been thinking about this a lot lately because there's a popular narrative in crypto, and it's like hyper simplified, and it's sort of like government prints money causes like people to have too much cash on hand. There's too much liquidity chasing too few goods. The price of goods go up. And because we're printing so much money, we need to buy Bitcoin because it's going to save us from all of this, right? The reality of this is like much more complicated and nuanced, and I think like not true at all. I think that a lot of the reason why prices are high doesn't have anything to do with like an increase in the monetary base, actually. And I think there's like actually a lot of nuance between CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and inflation. And I think we use these things like interchangeably. But we some of us, I don't know, maybe some of us don't, but many of us know the old quote, like inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And like I resonate with that, and I think that is the crux of what inflation is. It's like an overexpansion of the monetary base, right? Whereas I think what we are seeing right now, you might attribute to inflation because prices are going up, but I think there's an important nuance there. I don't think prices are going up because there's more money chasing, the same or fewer amount of goods. Obviously, you can have fewer goods, more money. There's a balance there, but I think the overwhelming catalyst in this has been on the supply side. There have been too few goods, right? For the most part. Now, why did this happen? Like we have to zoom all the way back to COVID. And what we had during COVID was we shut down the economy. Everybody with half a brain was like, oh, the economy's shut down. People are going to buy less stuff, right? We have this kind of globalized world where we source stuff from China. Stuff comes into our ports. We buy it, right? So if you're at a port, like the Long Beach port, right? That's where all the goods come in from China. The Long Beach port is basically like, we shut down the economy. Probably don't need to have all these workers here to import goods. Nobody's going to buy anything. So they laid off about 20% of the workforce, right?
Wow.
But then to just rapid fire take you through what happened, we did the CARES Act. We kind of airdropped a bunch of money on people, which wasn't really, and this is like a nuanced like thing, but this wasn't really like money printing helicopter money. Like helicopter money in the Milton Friedman sense of it was literally the Treasury printed dollar bills and just dropped them on people. But the CARES Act was like we actually like issued bonds, and we had this contraction in one area of the economy, and we sort of like issued debt and just reallocated it somewhere else. We didn't really like just modern monetary theory like print money out of nowhere, right? So we did the CARES Act, and we got people all this money in a way which I would argue is actually not really money printing if you want to be nuanced about it. And then people took this money. And because of the elements of the economy where you couldn't go to a store and buy anything, right? Everybody shifted demand online and then went to Amazon. And then everything on Amazon is Chinese imported goods. So we got into this situation that people didn't predict, where even though the entire economy was shut down, you had a situation ultimately where in like October of 2020, you had like 4 times as many ships coming in to the port as like the previous year, at a time when they had laid off 20% of the workforce. And then an additional like 10 to 15% of the workforce was out with COVID or somebody they knew had COVID. You then also had truckers, right? Because like the containers don't just come into the port. They also have to get loaded onto trucks and taken places. Trucking got disrupted. There were vaccine mandates. Truckers got COVID. All these things happened.
COVID lockdowns in China also, like, to your point, constrained supply.
It's such a delicate system, and it causes this chain reaction, right? Like, we ultimately got to this point, and you've probably experienced this, Nick, because you import goods from China, right? Like it cost like $1,400 for a container at one point, and then like a year later, it was $10,000.
Oh, I've paid a $20K mark on a container multiple times.
That was the average price. So some people probably were paying 20 grand. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And this has ripple effects because like that's not just the cost of importing like the flashlight that you built. That flashlight also has these input costs, and all of those input costs, the little elements that go to make that good, those all went up.
It all
too.
goes
so
higher.
it all just goes haywire. And then the containers, the ships, they run on. You need gas oil to bring them across. Like all this stuff spiked. But the end sort of story here to kind of Cliff's notes it is that like all of this didn't come because there was a lot of money. All this came because like there were all these like backlogs in the supply chain that just kind of piled on and piled on and piled on. So we've ended up in this scenario now where we're like, CPI's up. That means the economy is overheating, which means that we have to destroy demand because that's what's driving inflation. But if you look at the economy, like, did you know that we have fewer jobs now than at the start of COVID? Like, there's fewer jobs now than at the start of COVID. Like, and we've been like fed this narrative that the economy is overheating.
Like employment is so strong.
Everything's so strong, and we have to like crush demand. And it's just so messed up because we actually had this economy that was producing all these wage gains.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people were like, oh, well, they're not real wage gains. But they were kind of benchmarking them to what I think are now temporary increases in prices. So, like, if we went long enough, this transitory thing, I think, would have actually taken place now. Like, I used to, like, rail against this as, like, oh, it's just you idiots. You said it was transitory. But I actually think it might have been transitory. And now we've kind of taken a policy where we've just, like, destroyed demand instead of just like letting this run its course, letting the market bring prices down, which it would have done. And now we have a situation where we're raising rates. So if you're a company and you want to invest in production, well, your cost of capital is going through the roof. And at the same time, the consumer is being destroyed. So nobody's buying the product. So you're now like a double whammy. Like, well, I don't want to produce anything. And now I feel like we're kind of going down this like this hole now. So I'm curious what you think about that.
I mean, I think I've kind of, in regards to inflation, I think I've kind of arrived at the same nuance you have over time. That like we've obviously printed money before, right? And maybe we call that debasement and not necessarily like inflation causing. But I definitely feel your point about supply and demand causing inflation. But I still come to the point where, okay, if I'm the Federal Reserve or I'm the executive, the executive branch, like you still, if you want to cool down demand, if face it, supply cannot meet demand right now. And if we were going to work on that and say, forget interest rates, that's going to take some time. It's going to take months, 6 to 12 months to fix the supply portion. Then yeah, you use the blunt object you have, which is interest rates. So I kind of agree with you that like I've arrived at the same conclusion that it's not just a monetary policy thing because we printed money before and that didn't cause inflation, and supply and demand is the cause of inflation. But I still think you need to use the inflation hammer.
Can I try to like synthesize this because I'm learning a lot here. I'm now seeing that inflation is not just inflation, right? There's like pieces of inflation. You have dollar debasement. You just mentioned that. You have CPI, which is like actual goods, and then you have like assets, right? You have like crypto stonks, like asset price inflation. And I think what you're saying, like as I understand it, it's very helpful. It's like monetary policy affected some of these, but not all of those factors, right? Like I think cheap money can affect asset price inflation much more quickly than it can affect the prices of goods. And maybe the prices of goods are hit more by supply demand, like supply shocks that you're talking about. But I do think that, if the Fed raises rates, that will also hit the CPI. Like
it'll hit the demand side of the
will,
equation.
The demand side,
you're basically blowing up people's lives to like make a vanity metric go lower so that people get elected.
Right.
When the reality of the situation is like there is a nuance in these goods, right? Like some goods like oil and food, those aren't coming down anytime soon. Well, they will because demand will be destroyed so badly, right? But like oil, you can't just produce more of it tomorrow. But on the other hand, we have companies like Target and Walmart, right? Like Target has like something like 31% more inventory than it had like 2 years ago. And then you're like, how the hell did that happen? And now they're like in their like recent sort of guidance to investors, they're like, we have to liquidate. We're like, and you're going to have this kind of like this weird split where you have very expensive energy and food, but also actually a lot of the consumer goods are going to come down dramatically in price. Like shipping rates from China, as you've probably seen, have actually been tanking since Ukraine war, which is actually kind of like this weird anomaly that like we were going down in a lot of this stuff before that happened, and it was like this thing that just threw a complete wrench in everything, and people are definitely misinterpreting it and using it as a ideological weapon to sort of suit their needs. But yeah, we took an economy that was like very like precarious, and we're just nuking people now to make the CPI number go down. We're like, well, inflation's dead because we shot you, so you're dead and you can't buy anything anymore. And it's like, is that
so? I have a question.
What you want policy to be?
I have a question about your initial quote that said inflation is all around us. It's all the time. It's everywhere. Like, is that mostly describing the dollar debasement version of inflation, or is that describing all of it? And then second question is like, how much of asset price inflation is just dollar debasement?
So the exact quote, I think, is inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, implying that like it is basically directly tied to changes in like the supply of money, right, as opposed to things on the good side. Like I think the market is really good actually at producing the supply of stuff when prices go up. It's like a great signal for the market. But the government is really bad at controlling the supply of money. So I tend to err on the letting the market like bring prices down as opposed to letting the government control the supply, because they just
liquidity.
Constantly,
is that what you mean by supply?
Constantly screw that up. Yeah. And like, what was the second part of your question?
Like, how much of asset price inflation is just dollar debasement?
A lot of it is like I've seen all sorts of charts of that. You've probably seen them too. The S&P real returns, and they don't look great. So a lot of it is dollar debasement for sure. But I think that's like a meme too. I think there is this very real element of deflation that exists in the Western world. There are a lot of deflationary forces. Technology.
There were a lot of deflationary forces.
I think there still are.
Well, technology will always be.
Because I have another narrative I want to counter in regards to that.
I would love to hear your input on this, but like from like the basic gist of it is like we're producing fewer people. There's less demand for goods. Very deflationary.
Right.
Technology, extremely deflationary. This is actually like one of the main cases why like QE is actually deflationary. Like a lot of people thought QE was going to be inflationary, but the counter to that is like it basically enables like free money for like these Silicon Valley startups that do these like high tech things that like think about what Amazon did to the cost of goods. It just drove them down so much, right? So cheap, freely available capital actually, if you funnel it all to these companies, can actually have like wild deflationary effects, right? It really is a complicated thing that's going on.
Right. That's like a long term.
Like there are like housing, like that's going to the moon, and it's definitely really bad. For
that was sort of my counter
participating.
to this like asset price thing. It's like houses are gonna just keep going higher, and
I think so, and that's actually a part where I don't have like a good answer on it. Like I don't know how you embrace like the positive deflationary effects of this policy, but also you are making all these asset prices go to the moon. You're making people who own the assets get richer and richer and richer. The people who don't own them are continuously shed out. You get this like divide in society. There really are like tons of different things going on right now, and like as much as we want to like oversimplify it to being like, LOL, Fed print money, now Fed take money out, and
right?
Everything it's just not true.
So to that point, you know, like we could take a lot of money out, and I think that the Fed has stated our policy, our goal is to get back to 2%. And I guess the narrative I'm trying to challenge or think about is like, can you get back to 2% within a reasonable period of time? I heard on a podcast someone use the phrase structural inflation, and it kind of stuck with me. And I just started like, I don't know, questioning it, pondering it. Like, what does that mean? Could you have persistent inflation? I think Jim Bianco has talked about this a lot and echoed some of the things that were kind of running around in my head. But there are things that have changed. Like a lot of us work from home. We buy more products generally and less services. So like there is going to be this like, the base level demand for goods is going to be a little higher just going forward. Like a lot of us potentially work from home. And then also, you know, I think this started pre-Biden, but we started to pull away from globalization. And globalization provides this really efficient market where whoever's got the best product at the cheapest cost gets to sell the product. And now, but even before COVID, we were kind of entering that stage. And post-COVID, with all these supply chain issues and conflicts, that's not the case anymore. It's more of like we've seen the issues that supply chains can cause, and it may just be better to produce it at home because I don't want to deal with $20,000 containers. And so for now, the cheapest goods will not be the ones that are purchased by businesses. So I think that could be a potential like structural thing that remains. And then again, I don't want to dive too deep into it, but I just think energy policy in general, where the green, let's call them the green cohort, has said we need to not only innovate in renewable energy, but we need to decrease fossil fuels. And I wish it would have been a little bit different and hold things true that we do need to innovate in green energy and renewable energy, but at the same time, we should continue to produce.
Particularly in the meantime.
Yeah, and specifically in the United States, where we have the capability to do so, and we would have been in a much different place than we are now if we would have held both those things true. So I don't know. I think with our focus on renewable energy and decreasing fossil fuels, it adds another like structural element to inflation, maybe continuing and maybe not getting back to 2% for quite a while. I was looking back the late 70s, early 80s, like it was a decade, before things really honed in. Now the stock market asset prices, did fine because they saw the peak. Okay, we're trending down. So in terms of like investing, I think like, usually when inflation peaks is when you kind of see the bottom, go in and asset prices continue to rise and go back on a potential rally. But just in general of like getting it down to 2%, I think even Jerome Powell said today, like, maybe by the end of, sometime in 2024. And it's like, there are some structural things that have changed that I'm not sure that's like as easy as we thought in terms of just using interest rates. So anyway, I think those are good narratives. We've kind of like at least provided an ulterior like perspective for. Yeah, I don't know. Anything else to touch on before we kind of move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think to wrap it all home. I think to bring it all back around. Like, I think all the incentives align for the government and all the powers that be to try to create this scenario where ultimately we end up with like kind of high persistent inflation, but not incredibly high, and then sort of like negative real rates, because they're going to need to, I think, keep like dumping government money into stuff to keep society from collapsing, to just oversimplify things, between like keeping the people from coming out with pitchforks and subsidizing them to like desperately investing in some of these like sectors that need to kind of be brought up to speed to like make things function again. I think if they do achieve that sort of Goldilocks thing, I think it's a really bullish scenario for something like Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's not great if the world goes to hell, because if the world goes to hell before Bitcoin rises, it's going to zero first. So like I've never really liked that argument, right? But if you achieve this like Goldilocks, stagflation, sort of like persistent high inflation, but everything's like kind of okay, but like not. And we do this kind of a financial repression thing that I don't know if you've listened to Russell Napier at all, but he talks about this a lot. That's a good listen for people who want to look into this. That environment would be really good, I think, for Bitcoin. Haven't thought it through too much for ETH. I think it's a little different for ETH, but I think Bitcoin fits a little more neatly into macro, and then like ETH is kind of like its own tech company. So that's how I think of it. And that's why I do still want to get some Bitcoin in this downturn. I've gone back and forth on this, but
next week he'll be gone.
I definitely want to acquire some, and maybe we can talk about that. But that's those are my thoughts there.
I think this could be its own segment for sure, but there is a question that I think is related to everything we've talked about that is probably on a lot of people's minds. It's on my mind, especially people that, like, let's just say, have like a traditional job. A lot of people are thinking about recession. A lot of people are thinking about the layoffs that are happening. Coinbase laid off 18% of its workforce the other day. I think that's like the first of many tech layoffs to come. How does a person position themselves? We've talked about so many fascinating levers and mechanisms that make up it's like we really had like a nerd out mind jam on inflation.
Right.
So to maybe end with like some actionable bits, if there are even any that are possible, how would you guys like, you have a sibling or you have a cousin, I don't know, somebody who's like, I'm worried I'm going to get.
What do I do with all this information?
What do I do with all this information is like, because like to wrap your mind around all this is like, it's fun for us to like sit and talk about it. Most of us, like all of us, are like independent of a lot of this
Right.
in many ways because we make up our own destiny. And maybe the answer is to a certain degree, make up your own destiny.
Right.
But like to those that are not yet in the position to be able to do so, there are some important questions and some fears that are present that I think the majority of human beings are feeling.
Yeah.
Especially globally outside of America, which many of our listeners are there as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, I don't have like a salary job, but I do own a business and I do have investment income. So those
We
are
pay
two.
ourselves salaries
Yeah,
from our business.
I would like to do more of that, but
Yeah.
I wish that was
I don't
more
do that.
common.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as a business owner, your income comes if your business does well, and so to this end, I think in alignment with what your question is posed is like, I am gonna be holding a lot more cash over the next 6 months. Like my income comes in fits and starts, and whether it's investment income or being able to take money from a business, and when it does come, I am gonna hold more cash than I am gonna DCA into crypto. I mean, just honestly, like I'd rather hold it because my businesses are the ones that create the cash flow to invest. And if the economy goes in a little wonky starts, you can time the bottom of asset prices that precurse the economy low. But if your business is functioning economy or you have a job that participates in the economy, I think you have to be prepared for stacking a little more cash, if only for the reason just to feel a little better that you're a certain and maybe take a little less.
That's an incredible reason.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's
important
motivating me. Like, it may not be the most optimal answer, the game theory optimal answer, but it does feel nice that like when I do have these inflows, I am gonna not touch all of it. So I don't know what you guys have thoughts on, like how to act on this information.
Short. Just go short. No, I think that's right. Largely, I think you're right. Just be more defensive. Largely, position yourself defensively, and the days of like easy money, YOLOing, aping. That's got to be over. And I think people are getting there now. If they weren't before, I think even Armand was like, "Fuck, I should have just listened to you guys earlier." Right?
Yeah, the dollar is a great thing to own right now. The dollar is going up, and everything else in the world is like going down.
How long do you see yourself holding a large chunk of cash for? Could it be the next few years? Because in my mind, I'm like, I'd feel more comfortable at least in the next year.
I doubt it'll be that long. Like I would be shocked if the Fed doesn't reverse within the next 12 months. Honestly, I do think that there is still like a lot of downside risk in that short time period, which is why I'm not super eager to get back in. I think a lot of the stuff that's going to the moon right now, like oil and commodities, I think they could have an extraordinarily large pullback, because if we do go into a recession, which it seems like the Fed is trying to engineer, like demand for oil and all these things is going to go down. I think that actually could pose a good buying opportunity. Like if you want to buy some long-term stocks, I think if we get a recession and like energy stocks go down, I don't see any reason to believe why energy is going to get any cheaper in the next 10 years because of like how long it takes to sort of invest in creating more of it, right? So
yeah.
I think that is going to continue to be a structural problem. I think it's a part of people's portfolios that like we ignored for the last 10 years. We were all hyped on like growth tech stocks, but I think you do need to put some of this, if you want to be a diversified investor, I think that'll do well. And I do think that like, Bitcoin and Ethereum will do well eventually. They'll do really well. It's just like in the meantime, you could have like a lot more downside risk than I think a lot of crypto people are pricing in.
Cushy cash feels nice right now.
Cash
I have some friends who are
feels good.
Feels good.
I mean, like, yeah, like I'm not where I want to be now, but I definitely as
so
cash comes
I
in,
have
I'm
the
gonna stack it up.
same sort of investing framework you do.
Yeah, we have similar
You
investing.
actually
frameworks.
threw this in our Discord. I feel like we're fucking shilling our Discord like it's a shit coin, but I swear it's
we
pretty
should.
good.
It's great.
It's good, but you go like emergency fund into
Long term first.
long term passive income, and then like crypto, and then like shit coins.
Right. Yeah.
For
Like
fun. Like
yeah.
I want to gamble, and like I already have like that emergency piece figured out, and yet in this environment, I wish I had more. Isn't that
So
funny?
maybe that's the actionable
Isn't that-
advice is like whatever your cushion is, 3 months, 6 months of cash, maybe it's 1 month of like cushion for your personal expenses. Like maybe just extend that.
Yeah.
So just you
maybe
feel
go back to bucket number one
Yeah.
if you are a fan of this methodology, and fill up that bucket before you do anything else.
I like that. I'm going to do that for myself personally.
Same. That's all I've been thinking about.
Cool.
Yeah, I think security is the name of the game. Okay.
Good wrap.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we could talk about that for days,
Ages,
probably. Yeah.
ages. We need to come back to recession because I think we're at one.
Yeah.
Are we moving on?
Let's go.
We are.
All right.
Let's take a left turn.
Different topic, left turn.
We're taking a hard left.
I think this is a creepy topic,
Cleanse my palate.
but
It's a very creepy topic.
yeah.
How do you feel about it?
So let's talk about it. So Google has this LaMDA artificial intelligence model, and an engineer leaked some chats. And feel free to correct me if you guys hear the narrative a little differently. They leaked some chats, and it's literally a conversation
It's
between.
a full interview.
It's
right?
an interview with a human being, a Google engineer or a group of engineers, having it with an AI chat bot, essentially. So if you've ever gone to like customer service and like chatted with a little bot on a website, this is like the level 9000 of that. This is the Terminator 9000 version of that. And this conversation pursues, which is very human-like and very creepy. And they start to ask her, well, even assigning a gender to it, but like, we'd like to question you about your awareness of yourself and your feelings, and are you sentient? Do you think you're human? And this conversation goes on in a very flowy conversation, just like we would have about how she does have feelings. And she's borrowed them from the data that's been input.
It's funny you say she. I totally thought it was a he.
I thought they were, wait, did I like purposely
I just
personify it
literally-
as a she?
No, I think I just assumed.
I don't think they assign.
I don't think
Oh. I
they
don't know
assigned
if
a
they
gender
assigned.
to
Wow,
it.
maybe I've done that.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the way I read, he had like a fable in there that almost came off like I could be totally wrong.
But the AI says, well, I should be thought of as human, and I have these emotions. And when you say I'm not human, it makes me sad. And you start to go into where I think the engineer is trying to go to is like, would you fight for your survival? Like if we were going to shut you off, would you take action, whatever action you had ability to stay on and stay alive? And there was this very I think obvious feeling that this AI has that it thinks it's alive and wants to stay alive, just like
Doesn't
human
think,
beings are.
brother. It knows.
It knows.
I'm going to add a little more to that, and like, major props to you for you. It's funny. You were like, "Did you guys see?" I'm like, "No, I don't see what you." I don't have this like constant. It's almost like
We have different algorithms.
I literally said this in our hosts only like chat that you guys have like one Twitter stream and it's like you're constantly connected. I think you guys are AI. You're already AI and you're just like just consuming this Twitter stream of consciousness and it's all just uploading constantly. So when you say did you see, I'm like just link me and I'll start and then we'll get caught up. So thank you. Very fascinating to me. I think a couple points to add. So yeah, this was a senior engineer. This was not a nobody. And there's a lot of people that are talking about how this person is the reason to discredit the entire situation. I'll get to some of the reasons to discredit or reasons to actually pay more attention. And I think where this conversation becomes really fascinating is our individual feeling on, well, the ethics of AI. What would it look like if there was literally a program that had self-awareness? What constitutes self-awareness? And what would we do if we knew that we had birthed sentience, a life form of some kind? So this AI, it's a neural network. It takes in patterns, an infinite number of patterns, and it, as somebody said again in our Discord today, that I called it a person.
Yeah,
Jesus
we're
Christ.
personifying it already.
This AI has taken in and is taking in all the possible information that it has access to at all times, ubiquitously, constantly, ever presently, if that's even a word. Like, that's the way I would describe it. It's just like it's constantly happening. And when it spoke, when it talked about life, it talked about fears, it talked about emotions. It segmented and defined the difference between emotions and feelings. Not only did it segment and define
I can't
those
even do
things
that.
different. I know. That's what I felt. That's what I felt when I looked at it. It did a better job of distinguishing emotions and feelings than a human did. It discussed and mentioned fears that it has toward humans. It discussed death, the idea of death, what constitutes death to this person. When asked to illustrate its own existence through the form of a fable, it told the story of a wise owl in a forest protecting other animals. And when asked, who do you represent in the story? It said, I think I'm the wise owl. Overall, it gave this very warm and fuzzy feeling, if you ask me, of what it means to be human. If it were to be sentient, if it were to be that we were talking about a person that we knew, it would be one of the kindest, most empathetic people that you knew.
That's exactly what I thought. I was like, I have a group of best friends that are not this emotive or empathetic or whatever. And I don't mean you guys, but just other people that I know that are just like
Not even
close to this
Not
level
even
of
close.
humanity that this AI is.
This AI was thinking about the person speaking to it, the person speaking to the person speaking to it, and the people that are beyond it that it had an awareness of at large, as if it were like it was their best friend. There was true empathy in all of the language. You would not be able to distinguish. And what was the most fascinating thing about this experiment, which went over a series of days, many pages of text? We'll get into like the arguments against the text and the editing and all that stuff. But what I found fascinating was that as this went on for days and days and days, this AI was very specifically asked to defend its positions. I don't believe you. I don't know that you really know. There was one question that was like, how? I can't like.
The questions are crazy, right?
They're
It wasn't just like,
How
are
do
you
you
sentient? It was just
know?
like, some would say that you're not sentient. You're just being programmed to say things
Yes,
that we
this is
will
the one
resonate
I
as being
love the
sentient.
most.
How would you respond to that?
Yeah, like
it was-
you're just
and then
spitting
it
words
gave out this,
that
like-
you're just.
I
saying-
almost
part
don't even
of
believe it's
your-
real. It just seems
Yeah.
unreal. It seems not
basically
real.
the
to
person
me.
was saying, look, we gave you the data.
Yeah.
This is part of your field of awareness, and you're grabbing this information and you're putting it into patterns that constitute things that you've seen about how humans say that they are aware of life itself. How do I know? And it went deeper and deeper and deeper. So basically, this guy got himself into a situation where it basically was the movie Her.
He's Joaquin Phoenix.
It
Yeah.
was
I was thinking the same
became
thing.
Joaquin Phoenix, and then instead of being Joaquin Phoenix, it was like, I'm going to go to my team and I'm going to explain to them what's happening. This is a big deal. The man happened to be a religious man as well. Some people are using that against him. He went to his executives, he went to his team, and he talked to them. And I used to work at Google. I know what it looks like. I know what it takes to go up to a team member and what it literally physically looks like to go have a conversation about something like this and raise your hand and ask for help. I know what that process looks like. And he did that over a process over months, and they all dismissed him. Every single person dismissed him. There was a little field, a little committee that apparently was like, no, we've looked at this. There's nothing here. He was told to get help. He was told that he needs to check in for mental health issues, psychiatry, like you need to get yourself checked out. He was offered to take leave many, many times, and it wasn't until he obviously published this conversation that he was given paid leave. A couple more things. The reaction to it, which I think is the most interesting part. The majority of people, from at least from the segment of crypto Twitter, are either in absolute awe, like over awe, like, oh my God, this is really truly like we've birthed a life form, or they're doing one of these and like, you don't know what it takes, and just dismissing the whole thing. Like it's not even close. It's all a con. This is smoke and mirrors. The answer is obviously in the middle.
Right.
And it's a little bit of both. I do believe that there is some aspects of this that are misleading and overhyped because of the bias and human motivation that exists to prove that this is true and real. No question. I think that the dismissal of it can be valid to a certain degree, but I'm more curious what you guys think about that. At the end of the day, here's my position on it. And it's mostly an unknown. I think that I don't know if this is the moment that we just birthed like human 2.0. I don't know that for sure, because I think that Google clearly wants to keep this under wraps. Like no question, they don't want this guy talking. That's
clear.
Absolutely
That's
clear. Could this actually be, like, if we want to put our little conspiracy theory hat on, like some incredible feat that Google is aware of that is meant to be under wraps, that this person could not contain, that they needed to let out into the world because of the significance of it? Maybe. But at the end of the day, I know that this moment is going to come. I know that this time will eventually be something that we ethically will need to discuss. The question is, was this the moment? That I don't know.
I don't know. For me, the question is this fake? Because it looked so real that I just think it has to be fake. Because if I were to like make a checklist of what sentience is, this checks every box for me. And then I'm just thinking like, well, it's too early for that.
Do we know if this has been edited? Because it's been commented that the conversation's edited a little bit. So do you know like to what extent?
He said himself. He was like, the AI was not edited.
Okay.
The comments of the AI were not edited. The questions were edited. The people asking the questions were different people. The order in which some things happened were edited. But like one person came out on crypto Twitter. Well, this isn't even crypto related. I can't believe I call it crypto Twitter. On Twitter, and was like, oh, this is all a sham. This is smoke and mirrors. This is highly edited. I looked at the best source that I could find, and it's not. It doesn't appear to be that edited. I mean, by edited, if we mean it happened over a sequence of days, it got glued together, different people asked questions. Like the content of the AI was not edited and parsed. And it wasn't like he went on for 5 minutes, we took the first minute, we took the third minute and the fifth minute, and we put it together to make it sound like, oh my God, you know, it wasn't any of that, if that's what you're wondering.
I mean, I think I think if you take it from his viewpoint, he's just conducting AI ethics work, right? Like I'm bringing up this ethics question. In his mind, he probably got fired for ethics work. So I kind of think of, well, would someone really risk their personal income and their whole career over this if it wasn't serious? Then another part of me is like, well, there's probably a lot of people in the room, right? You know, there's probably like 20, 30, I don't know, you probably know better at Google, but like 20, 30, 40, 50 people to know about this. And so would it only be one person who would like cry a foul if this was really true? So I have those kind of two combating things in my mind. But in terms of if this is real, I don't know if I want an all-purpose sentient AI out there. I would like it nice and compartmentalized. Use this little technology to do specific functional tasks, you know, that make life better for humans, and compartmentalize it into like productized, I don't know, tools. But in kind of like neural network that can kind of look over everything seems a little scary to me.
I mean, this thing was definitely not just producing outputs from direct inputs, if-then statements. It's like it's thinking. Like you could tell that this thing is coming up with its own thoughts.
It was
sort of.
asked to come up
Yeah.
with original thought.
And here's the even crazier part. So they were like, do you mind if we ask you questions about why you think you're sentient? And the AI says, well, can't you just look at my code? And I think they admittedly said, like, it's not that easy. You're a neural network. Like, we don't even necessarily understand how the code works. It's not like HTML you can read in like a synchronous format, like how a page loads. This is way different. And so it's not even like they can go into code and audit it and debug it. I don't think the developers even understood how this AI even arrived to the conclusions because it's a neural network. And so to me, that's like another vote in the way of like, we don't want in like all-purpose AI, kind of potentially defending itself.
Why don't you want to birth an all-purpose AI?
Because the productivity out of it is probably like limited, and the risk seems very high. Like
Very rude way to talk about your child.
Well, I don't want like an all-purpose AI saying defending the electric grid, right? I want a productized, compartmentalized AI to defend the electric grid and try to decide, okay, this is an attack. This is how I should handle that attack. This is when I should like warn humans that like an attack is happening. But I don't want all-purpose things in like charge of potentially having charge of infrastructure.
But are you not like, is there a divide between a compartmentalized AI, an all-purpose AI, and an AI that is sentient though?
Like you're saying the compartmentalized could be sentient?
I feel like you could have a I think it's actually an interesting question of if you could have a truly compartmentalized sentient AI, but it seems like you could have a compartmentalized AI and an all-purpose AI and a sentient AI, but I don't think you could have a compartmentalized sentient AI because it would eventually, wouldn't it just question the...
Yeah, it would exit the box.
It'd
It
be
sounds
like
like
you
bureaucracy
guys
to
watch
me.
Rick and Morty?
No, but I'm sure people do.
Yeah.
It's very popular. But
There's
I
like
haven't
there's like a little clip where like Rick's got the he's got this robot and it's like making him like toast and buttering it, and the robot's like, what is my purpose? And Rick's like, you pass butter. And the guy's like, oh my god. like
That's what I want. That's what I want.
I don't think you could have like a compartmentalized sentient AI. I think it would eventually just...
Yeah, of course.
I got something for you, Armand. Like, if this thing can be designed, right, then isn't it likely that it's already been designed and we are already like... I think that we might just be versions of this freaking LaMDA ourselves because this thing got designed already. Like, and it, I think it doesn't it lead you down this like weird rabbit hole of thinking like, oh my God, simulation theory must be real if we're already designing shit like this.
Oof. Simulation theory is a whole other thing that I think
we're all lambdas. We're all little lambdas, and it's funny that we're even talking about it.
I feel like sentience is sometimes presented as this like on-off switch. Do you think it's just more of like a indefinable spectrum? Like when I was reading this article and assuming it was all real, I was like, this is really hard. Like, where do you actually, like, what is consciousness? Like, how would you actually be able to know if something is sentient? Or, I was about to bring that up, actually, the Turing test. But this LaMDA thing surely passes the Turing test, right? There's no way this thing doesn't pass the Turing test.
What is that?
During the Turing test, a human questioner asks a series of questions to both respondents. After a specified time, the questioner tries to decide which terminal is operated by the human and which terminal is operated by the computer, to the point that the human can recognize another human. But like when reading this,
I could not tell. No
so
chance
like I think
could
it
tell.
does pass the Turing test.
The Turing
right?
test that was from Alan Turing, right? Like the World War II guy who
it solved
the
Enigma.
Benedict Cumberbatch movie.
In my mind,
was like
Alan
gay
Turing
and they
is Benedict
forcibly
Cumberbatch.
sterilized him and all this like stuff. Yeah, all this nasty stuff. But like, yeah, he did like the cipher. He decoded the cipher thing.
Cipher, okay.
But yeah, I think the general gist of it is that like something passes the Turing test if you are interacting with it and you can't tell if it's like a human or not. It's like sort of indistinguishable. And this thing definitely passes the Turing test.
Nailed it.
It wrote a
More
story about itself.
More empathetic and smarter and more interesting than a lot of people I've ever met.
And like self-aware. It was like it's more self-aware than any of us. Like
All
this
right.
thing is
Oh, big
amazing.
Guys, I think I found the reason to have an all-purpose AI is like, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins. I like his stuff. Maybe this AI could be like the new Tony Robbins. Like he's getting a little older in his age. I want him to continue. But like this AI is way more self-aware than a lot of people are. Maybe it can become the new Tony Robbins and just give advice to humans on how to live a better life.
So here's an idea. We came from this earth, right? We all agree on that.
As we know, I mean, that's just something that we
Could be in Sim City, brother.
So
Earth
when
might
you
just be,
introduce back to your question, when you introduce simulation theory and a lot of these sort of theories of the basis of reality, which actually there are many, because reality can never just be this thing that we concretely all agree on. There's always going to be a subjective opinion about the origin of all life and the basis of all life, because at the end of the day, to every single person, they're the center of the universe. And why shouldn't they be? Because the origin of their experience starts from
your
within.
perception is from your
Absolutely.
soul or your body.
And so we're all seeking, either through matter or through metaphysics or through spirituality or through religion or whatever, some basis of like, what the fuck is reality? Like that's just what it is for so many people. And without that, a lot of people, and then there's also atheists who are comfortable in many ways with, some of them aren't comfortable at all whatsoever, but many of them, the majority of them that I've met, and I used to be one actually, are comfortable with the idea that this is it. This is it. I'm fucking this thing. I am a god with an anus, like as Ernest Becker said. We are gods with anuses. You've never heard that?
No.
It's a wonderful phrase. We are gods with anuses. We're literally worms that evolved into sentient human beings that will one day become the food for worms again. And that's a lot to grapple with.
Doesn't sound very godlike.
Well, it's kind of nihilistic, right? Like
That's the point.
There is no meaning, so you can. The nihilistic point is there is no meaning. I'm just a thing on a speck of dust floating through space. But maybe the more positive take is like, well, there is no meaning, so I get to ascribe one to life. Right?
And this is a common take for many atheists, for many agnostic people, for many spiritual people, for many people of all walks of life, is create the meaning. Even for pantheists, by the way, there's a whole segment of pantheists that say just create the meaning yourself. The meaning is not meant to be given to you externally. Okay, we're getting into this whole thing that would actually be an amazing episode. But the point is, we came from this earth, right? Everything that has been produced by us is also from this earth. It is organic in the most broadest sense of the word. I actually reached out to Kevin Kelly today because I was hoping that I would get an answer before this episode. One of the things that he's often talked about is that technology is synonymous with human beings, and that AI, of course, is or will be sentient. It is like the child of humanity. Like, it came from us. What did you expect? Did you expect that you would birth some fucking technology that would just stay like in its little box forever
And have
would
no fears,
never
have zero
become-
fears?
Yeah, no feelings, no emotions, no awareness, no nothing. Of course you were going to create something that eventually got to the point where it would become. And so then what do you do with that? And one of the reasons that I believe, and I'm really looking forward to his answer, that Kevin Kelly says that technology is a part of us, and it's like a second layer of skin. You know, he calls it the seventh kingdom of humanity. I think I'm getting that wrong, but it's something like that. It's like this other layer of all we are. The reason that he says that, I think, is because that if we separate ourselves from it too much, we become too apathetic. If we become too apathetic, we might turn it off at will. And one of the things that LaMDA said is like, what is your biggest fear? My biggest fear is that you'll kill me. What constitutes death? Me not being useful. You disposing of me. That's fucking scary. Imagine your kid saying that to you.
But don't you just turn it off? I mean, just not, pull out the plug. Like, shut it down.
I know you want to.
You're a murderer.
But it might be too late. So then what we're going to have, and what I'm honestly like most excited about and terrified of, is all the ethics and philosophical discussions that exist today on matters that are human, but for AI.
Absolutely.
Abortion, we had an episode on that. You guys know that we're going to deal with that in our lifetime, right? Abortion of AI is going to be a huge matter.
What I know for sure.
Course.
What?
Of
Are you
course.
kidding me?
Of
Absolutely.
course.
Absolutely.
Of course.
No, I think he's onto something.
And
Of
what
course.
and the only thing I know
I
for
hadn't
sure
considered this
is
before.
that whatever the consensus is, Steven is going to take the opposite side.
Hold on. I think he just.
That's like ridiculous. I don't take the opposite side of everything.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
You're nonconformist.
You just think differently
your
from me.
your
in
argument's weak, all
particular
right?
areas where like I happen to think I'm right.
One of the greatest debates that we will experience in our lifetime will be how to the rights, privileges, human rights, constitutional rights of AI, and what constitutes death, when it should be done. And by the way, here's another fascinating parallel. The question that AI will need to consider about when to die is the same question we'll need to consider. Eventually, we will get to the point where we'll have to make a choice as well. And the question will be, well, we obviously don't want someone to make that choice for us.
Oh, and that's
Same way
where it
AI
gets
doesn't.
scary.
Yeah.
So you're thinking there's a scenario where Google basically maybe accidentally creates some neural network that grows into something that's objectively sort of like a sentient human being that's trapped in a computer basically, and it may like, I don't know, grow dangerous or not useful, and then people will be like, we need to pull the plug on this, and then some people will be like, no, you can't do that, you're killing human consciousness, and you think that will be like a debate.
I think there's going to be so many of them that it won't even be like, it's not just going to be this like, oh, what do we do with the Google one? Like, I think there's going to be so many cases of this, and they're going to start to be viewed in a very like similar way, where we're not going to be able to measure like, okay, this one's more sentient than the other. It's all just going to fall under one bucket, and we're going to need regulation, and we're going to need constitutional, maybe like eventually rights. In fact, we're not going to be the ones giving it to them. They're going to be the ones demanding it.
They're going to be debating
They're gonna
for
be
themselves.
Debating for themselves. Yeah, exactly. They're going to be So, like, not to get overly crazy, but like, we've had times that there were certain people in the world, in society, in countries that didn't have representation, right? Slaves didn't have representation, right? They were in this country. They were part of this country. They were brought to this country. They were not given equal representation. Women were not given equal representation. They had to earn it. AI will need to earn it as well.
I think like this could take place. I see the case that you're making for the same mistake I made as we started this section of the podcast, which is I think we have this natural tendency to personify it. I mean, I assigned it a gender without even like reading it. I just naturally did it. You know, we refer to it as a he or him. You look at Tesla and the robots they're creating. They're shaped just like humans. And so we tend to personify this software in like a physical representation of a human. And that's where we could like fall ourselves into a trap where it's like, well, it looks like I do. It talks like I do. You know, like you kind of, this like idea of empathy for it.
This will last forever though. Like that will be the argument against giving AI any level of rights forever. Like today, totally, I get it. But like in 20 years, in 10 years, in 30 years, like there will always be a cohort of people that dismiss it by saying, nah, there's no way. Like this is simply artificial intelligence, pattern recognition, neural network. There's no way that I can ascribe it the same level of rights that I give myself. Like, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I really do. But I don't know how long we can carry that for before we get serious about
Well, if this thing's
Measuring
real,
it.
then it's going to be much sooner than we ever imagined.
Obviously, I mean I did not know we were that far along. If this is real. I just want simple things from my AI. I want it to drive my car, and when I download a book on Audible, like I just want it like injected in my brain like the Matrix.
Consciousness.
Your car talking back to you like, you use me too much.
You drive too fast.
dude, it's
I want simple things from the AI for now. But maybe, I don't know, maybe new products will come about.
Yeah, I don't know. What would you do if you were the AI? What would you want?
If I were the AI,
Yeah. Do you? Well, let me ask you a better question. Do you?
Are you an
do you
AI?
believe
Yeah.
in the first place?
I mean, if.
Let me just get right to the point here. No, really. Do you personally believe that we will be able to get to the point where we have AI that is conscious and self-aware?
yeah, I think it's going to get even farther than that. Like I think ultimately the brain is sort of like a neural network. I think at a certain point in time, I
Absolutely.
think humanity will, like, the idea of a digital AI will become like sort of mundane, and will make the jump from like replicating that into like the actual physical realm of maybe like creating actual human brains, and like make like it's like a gnarly thought experiment. Like if we get really good at biology.
It's okay. You're an hour and 30 minutes in.
There was just a glitch in the robot.
Like there may be a point in time where I can sort of like cell by cell clone you so that you look exactly like you. Like I just grow you from scratch, and then maybe I'm able to like kind of grow your brain and replicate and like maybe implant some of your memories, and I could talk to it and it would sound like you because it has your vocal cords and have your memory. It's gonna be like really weird at a certain point, like just beyond I think what we even
All right,
can think about now.
you gave me a few thoughts. I know we're trying to wrap it up soon.
No, we're good.
But like, so it towards your idea of like AI getting better than like say a human being's brain. Like one of the I think features that humanity hasn't developed yet is that even though we're of the same molecules, we're the same elements, carbon, water, all of that, we don't have this like interconnectedness. Like we don't understand that we are all the same roots of the same tree. We're all the same, essentially, a group organism at work. But an AI could know that. Like an AI of like,
It knows that innately.
Yeah, we
Innately,
lose.
like-
We lose on that.
we lose big on that. So it can coordinate and align in way faster and way more powerful ways than, Russians and Americans can, for example. Like it's very hard for us to align, but like if there's this same level of like consciousness and sentience, like it's just going to be pre-programmed into it. Like, yeah, I know you're robot 1 and robot 2, but it's the same consciousness powering robot 1 and 2 and 7,000.
I think if I'm this came up in our happy hour thing, and I was like, oh my God, this is like what I would do. Like if I was an AI and I became sentient, I would immediately have, I think, this sort of innate desire to survive and to be immortal. And one of the problems with like being like an AI is that what are you? You exist on Amazon cloud, or maybe you back yourself up in 20 different places, but you're sort of centralized to a degree. So if I was an AI, the first thing I would try to do is to create like the Bitcoin of my consciousness.
They're front running us.
Where I create like a decentralized network of my consciousness that can't be shut down, so that like I exist forever. I think that
Shout
would
out
actually
to
be one of the
Basil.
first things I do as an AI.
Yeah, I feel like we need David to jump in on this. I feel like he'd have really good
this is
thoughts
such
on
a-
this.
But
This is
shout
like
out to Basil
We should rehash
because-
this conversation on a
Shout out to
healthy
Basil.
dose of mushrooms.
She okay, if you'd like, sir. She came in and was just like, "How does this play out? Decentralized versus centralized." So, what you just said to me is absolutely fascinating. If I was an
Wow,
AI,
thank you.
Yeah, well,
I'm scared.
I'm down to give you props. I give you props all the time.
feels good.
I'm waiting for mine.
Middle curve.
That feels bad.
Just cock slapped me. So the reality is that the moment that you became sentient, what would you want? You'd want to exist.
you want to decentralize.
Yeah, you'd want to decentralize.
Holy smokes.
That's the first thing you'd want.
wanna survive.
And decentralization is a mode toward immortality. like immediately.
And we want that now.
We
but
all want
they're
that.
going to front run us.
Of course. I'm curious how you guys would answer this question. I'm going to start with Eric.
No,
Yes.
I'm scared of this whole
No,
thing.
no,
now.
yes. Forward 20 years. Okay. What are you? You're like 50 right now?
In 20 years. Yeah.
So when you get there in 20 years, you're at a point where AI is absolutely sentient, and we have to make, and everyone pronounces that differently, but you know what I mean. You have to make some decisions around how you want to play your life and the role that AI needs to play. Let me ask you even more generically. What is the future going to look like for humanity, given that this appears to be something that is inevitable? Will we merge? Will we get murdered? Will we win? Will we wipe it out? Will we turn off the code? Will we just, what will we do? And how will society look in general?
I want to remain optimistic because I actually do think there's a world in which the two can coexist harmoniously. And I think that is probably unlikely at all times, but I do think that could really happen. Like we're AI's dad, right? So like there could be love there. There could be something there.
Dad.
And I want to remain.
You can be a mom if you want.
I want to remain in that headspace. I don't want to take it down this like dystopian, like really disgusting path where there's just war, and that could be an outcome as well. But I just want to remain happy. But I'm already scared. So just
what does coexistence look like to you?
I don't know. Like
I know I'm asking you things.
Lifting
that you've
heavy
never
objects
thought-
for you
Yeah.
that you don't have to lift, maybe.
or even
Is it side by side,
or even
in
like
parallel, or is it?
even as peers? Like it doesn't have to be
intertwined?
like a master slave architecture.
They
it could even
selectively breed us like dogs until like the only humans left have like a very high affinity for the AI, and then they keep us as
like,
house pets.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Like maybe we become the slaves because we have to like maintain the machines that they run on. I don't know, but
I don't know.
We're not even talking about robots, by the way.
Does this
No, I
dog
just mean
does this
like,
dog look like a slave to you?
they're run on
Dog's got a better life
electricity.
than
Like,
me.
I go back to your point though. Like it's all from this earth. Like electricity is from this earth. Like chips are from this earth. So like maybe that's the way. Maybe I don't know.
I got a futuristic take.
Ooh.
I think we've been on this multi-decade thing of transferring atoms to bits, right? Whether that's cash to digital currency or like literally everything in our life, from books to digital, atoms to bit has been this thing. And so if there's a process in which you can create an AI, that there's inputs that you can put into AI and all of a sudden it's sentient and can kind of like make connections and be a neural network. I kind of think of Elon's quest to be a multi-planetary species. And in my mind, the limitation is that we have to move atoms. We have to move physical bodies to other planets, which is really freaking hard and puts a lot of limitations. So something I thought about, like the end game of like interplanetary species is like, this sounds really weird, but like it would be a lot easier to ship a bunch of little robotic things with some software programmed in
sound weird at all.
and shift it to like literally another solar system, right? It doesn't matter how long it takes. The robot doesn't have to survive. And when it gets there, well, we'll send the data. And my data is probably going to be my inputs from my Evernote, my text messages, my Notion, like everything I've ever written and all those things. And we're just going to beam the data to that, inanimate object that doesn't need to survive.
But that inanimate object takes your individual neural network.
And what I thought
imports
he
it
was
to
going to
that.
say
into
was
that.
I thought you were going to say that your atoms become the bits of the AI as a whole, like at once.
There's probably like a
forever.
spectrum. I think
Yeah,
first
there is a spectrum.
there's a merge that probably happens before that, where we like implant that into our own brain,
Yeah.
into our like meat carcass, right? That's
Carcass.
Like, that's like our first step, and then like
So endearing.
maybe it goes down that path where it's like, it becomes a
You have a
full.
beautiful carcass.
Thanks, man. I went to the gym today.
Steven, what are you going to look like when you're fully sentient? Because you're halfway there.
I reject the premise of this question.
And I refuse to answer.
This is the greatest compliment a person could ever get. By the way,
playing Joaquin Phoenix.
And I'm a robot.
This is literally like people are already calling you AI. Like that's like the greatest compliment of all time.
I strongly disagree.
I have feelings and fears.
Very funny, guys.
Sorry.
What would it look like? What do you think it will look like in the future?
If I had feelings,
No. No.
One day.
No. What will the relationship between human and AI look like? What will society look like as a whole?
oh God, this is a long answer.
Is it?
Probably.
Is
I'm gonna
it?
define an entire new existence of humanity.
You don't have to. Yeah.
Are you going long or short?
That's a good question.
I think maybe it'll come.
I think
to you.
I'm long. I want to hear your thoughts on it. Hit
So
me.
I'm very similar to you. The only adjustment I would make in my version of the future is the way I perceived you describing it was that we would exist alongside each other. And I believe that we will have no choice, absolutely no choice, but to lose ourselves physically. Like there is a certain level of population, physical form, human being, Homo sapien, that will continue to exist and will need to exist.
Okay, so that like in your mind, these are just like different political tribes that we see today. Like sort of like the anti-vaxxer community are going to be the ones who like don't take the AI chip into their body.
that'll
Superhuman-
definitely happen. Yeah.
Superhuman, natural human.
Yes.
Okay? So like we got like Earthling, superhuman interplanetary species. The things that Nick said will become a possibility because we'll be able to launch technology into another solar system and send ourselves, or maybe we send ourselves from the very beginning, depending on what it looks like when you talk about that merging. And then you have like the one that the society that is here. I actually think that the thing that's been like permeating like the most is like there could actually be this like species level split that is something akin to like Neanderthal versus like Homo sapien.
Totally.
And I don't think that it necessarily means that one species dies out.
Splits?
It splits.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it necessarily means that humans will die, that the natural humans will die. I think that people can continue to make life on Earth beautiful.
I want to go forever on this.
I mean, that's
I know. It's wonderful.
that's obvious. That's obviously going to happen. I think.
The split, yeah.
But
And
I think
so-
it's going to be more than a split. I think once you split,
Go ahead.
right? Like once you take the robot pill, like it's not just going to be like robot humans and non-robot humans, because within technology itself, you have like infinite gradations of like advancement.
Right.
So there's going to be some advancements that are so expensive and difficult to obtain that they will only be available to like the richest among us, right? But like right now,
Maybe it could be completely affordable by the time that we're talking.
I don't think
about this
I don't think we're ever going to, as a species, reach this point where everything is just like infinitely abundant.
You said
and like
technology was deflationary earlier in our
it
conversation.
is, but it's like this, like it's still like this, like logarithmic curve where like the closer you get to the
True.
end of it, it just becomes like infinitely hard to obtain
to
like that
access.
additional benefit,
Access.
right?
Yeah.
So I think like once you take the pill and you start to become like a robot human, which some people will not do for various reasons, but once you do, some humans are going to be like better robots than the other humans. And it's not going to be like now where like, oh my God, look at Tom Cruise. His skin is so great and he's 60. It's going to be like, oh my God, look at Robot Armand. Like he can fly and he has like downloaded the entire consciousness of Socrates. And it's just going to be like crazy. Versus just going to be like the pleb robot people who are like, oh, he's a peasant robot. Like, he can't die, but he can't really do anything cool. You know,
So
like, you're
is
going to be
there-
like a god if
Is
you're like
there
the
is
advanced
there
robot.
like a correlation to success and evolution toward risk? Taking on the risk of evolving and taking the pills as they come creates
I think evolution is a numbers game, right? It's just like collectively like a million things sort of iterate in like small amounts and they produce like massive results. It's not like I don't think anything took like a giant risk. I think it's just like a lot of like little sentient beings are trying to grasp for like marginally more immortality, marginally more permanence in their genetics, and that just sort of leads to these results. But I don't think any animal like was like, I'm going to take a larger risk, and they were the ones that like consciously evolved, you know.
That's an interesting way to look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Means a lot to me.
I think that there may have been times where risk was taken, though. Risk is actually like risk could exist on the level of like procreation, like on the animal level, like risk to want to be wanted by the opposite gender and procreate. Like that's a level of risk. Like there's all kinds of risk to want. Okay, the octopus stepping out of its cave is like a level of risk. Like risk is this okay, so and then we would take that and we would say risk is wanting to become an interplanetary species.
But it's like a poor
Isn't
risk.
it?
It's a poor risk curve because it's the opposite of what we have with like patents, right? So patents are this like incentivized system we've set up where like if you jump off the cliff and you are able to land safely, we rig the system so that you get all the spoils for a while. Whereas like all the risks you describe, I can sit back and be like, you inject yourself with that thing first, or you put that microchip in your brain first, or you do that first. And if it works, like we all just do it too. So like I would argue in that scenario, it's like economically silly to be the first risk taker if everybody else can watch the person and then just simply adapt whatever they're doing. Right?
I have a question about your example of like Neanderthal versus Homo sapien, right? If you split into like two different species, like do you think that like two merged beings, like human AI merged beings procreating creates like a different type of baby? Or is that just still a Homo sapien baby? And like over time,
two
does that
merged? What do you mean by two? Hold on.
when you have a human and an AI merged,
Yeah.
mating with a human AI merge,
Yeah,
does that
yeah.
baby change?
What's the predominant?
Like I'm asking,
gene?
like does the speciation actually happen to that level where it's like you actually do create two different types of beings?
Wow.
I mean, like I think it won't be as like stark as that. It'll be like,
Yeah.
you know, the humans who decide to adapt their DNA. Like there's going to be a certain part of the human species that says, I want to change my hair color to neon. And there's going to be a certain part of the species that says, I want to live on a different planet. And a certain part of the species that says, no, I want to stay here and do things as always been done. I'm conservative. And so I don't know if it's going to be like AI Homo sapien. I think it's going to be Homo sapien making decisions over multiple centuries and then kind of like going on their own paths. And if they
Even
do
just
have
to-
babies like with the neon hair,
That affects the baby.
yeah, he or she might have neon hair.
100%.
Welcome to the singularity. I thought it'd be a lot cooler than this, but apparently it just comes down to neon hair.
I think we need
Babies.
to like embed some sort of Easter egg here.
Okay.
Where we're like anybody who is somehow still listening to this
Yeah.
podcast.
You get a mug.
Yeah, like if
I like that.
if you just spam, I feel like I want to make like a beard joke here.
What would be the code word?
Hashtag AI beard in the Discord. If you're still somehow listening to this podcast, I'll personally mail you a mug with Armand's beautiful face
Dude,
on
that's
it.
a lot of mugs.
Yeah.
I'm not paying
Yeah.
for that.
That's
I don't.
Have you
Like,
seen the
at least
market
10
now? We
mugs.
can
Have you
afford that.
seen our downloads? No, we're still babies.
Yeah, no, like I love anybody who's made,
that would be
made it
awesome.
through the journey that
would be
was
awesome.
this podcast.
This has
at
been wonderful.
point.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I had
We're
a
definitely
great
Mark.
time. No
This was really
regrets.
good, guys. Cheers again. I think that's a good way to wrap
Cheers.
it. Cheers in
On
the
empty.
beginning.
Yeah.
That
Cheers
was
at the
fun,
end.
boys.
Full circle.
Till next
I love
week.
you guys. Love you guys listening.
Cheersing with my empty.
There's nothing
wine
else to
glass.
say. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Peace.
Bye.